Hello, neighbor. I'm Robert Burns, and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And today it is my distinct privilege to have appearing with us Mr. C.J. Matthews. And I want to start out by saying Mr. Matthews is a candidate for sheriff in Ascension Parish, as evidenced by his t-shirt that he's wearing that we're zooming in on. And let me just say this, for anyone who's wondering, okay, well, now are you going to start openly advocating candidacies? The answer would be no. However, as everyone who's familiar with this blog is aware, it's named Sound Off Louisiana in order to afford anyone, and I do mean anyone, the opportunity to sound off about governmental issues that they have found disconcerting to them. And Mr. Matthews fits that case, and it's largely what he's going to relay to you over a series. We'll be doing a series on this. This will be the first installment. That served as the motivation for him to enter the sheriff's race. And we're going to give you a link for an advocate article, and it will, for those of you who are inclined to read ahead, obviously there's nothing I can do to stop you from doing that, and you're welcome to do it. But I do want to say this, for those who do choose to read ahead, we will be going into far greater detail than the advocate article. That's not a criticism of the advocate article. It's just the nature of the type of production that we do. We have that ability, and we have that. It's a video blog, and I think lends much more to have the first person account of it, and we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. But let me just say this, Mr. Matthews, who is a 30-plus year veteran of the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office, there are other instances that he has been aware of that are very similar to the one we're going to talk about in excruciating detail in these upcoming features. But in late February to early March of 2018, then Deputy Matthews, or whatever title you had, was it? Captain, okay. Captain Matthews observed something that was quite troubling to him, and even more so troubling than what we're about to relate to you in this first episode is the way it was subsequently handled by his superiors. So with that introductory foundation, Mr. Matthews, welcome to Sound Off Louisiana, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me. Like Robert said, my name is C.J. Matthews. I am a candidate for Ascension Parish Sheriff. The election is October 14th, 2023 this year. And before we go any further, I want everyone to know, please do your research on all candidates, not just in the sheriff's race, but for every race that's going on, not just in the parish, but around this country. Do your research, make an informed decision. Now back to me. Like you said, I'm a 30-year veteran of the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office. I started in December of 1989. I did a couple of years in patrol. Then I moved into detectives and did criminal investigations. Subsequently got promoted and went into narcotics. And I spent about 13 or 14 years in narcotics. From that, I moved on to training, and that's pretty much where I ended my career. The last 10 years of my career was in training. I'm also a original member of the crisis response team. That's what Ascension Parish calls SWAT. There were 7 of us, and I did 25 years on that team, about 8 of which I was the commander. Either way you look at it, good or bad, I was chosen to lead a contingent of men up to Baton Rouge for the riots in 2016. And also that fateful Sunday, the following Sunday, where those 3 officers were murdered. I led a contingency of SWAT guys up here for that as well. So that's basically my resume in a nutshell. What brings me here today is in the end of May 2018, I was tasked with doing some training for active shooter. It came to my attention that a couple of juvenile investigators were missing from the training, and we had not had any scheduled makeup days. So I inquired about it, and I got told, well, they're busy. I'm like, okay, well, things happen. So the following week, excuse me, we had some intense training for our school resource officers. And one of the adjutant instructors that was there to help me with that relayed to me what had happened to a former school resource officer named Fred Corder.
All right.
I inquired, and he said that he was actually a part of the takedown team, if you will, during the investigation. And what he relayed to me at that time was that a female had came in to the sheriff's office in reference to a different complaint.
Okay.
And in relaying that complaint to the deputy, she basically told the deputy that, by the way, one of your deputies is trying to get into my pants.
Ah, okay.
So that officer did the right thing. He notified his supervisor notified juvenile. They came out and they began an investigation, which culminated into other things, taking statements from the female, which clearly indicate that the deputy was after sexual favors. According to her, he also solicited nude photographs of the juvenile female. Now we're talking about a 16-year-old female student.
Okay, high school.
Yes, sir.
A high school student.
A school resource officer who was a law enforcement officer who was there to protect and serve our children, and he's a predator in the schools.
Okay.
Okay. So they basically bring the female in and they give her a list of phone numbers. She picks out Corder's number right off the bat.
Okay.
So at that point, they conduct a sting operation. And in my opinion, after having worked 14 or 15 years in narcotics and countless undercover operations, they pretty much botched it. And I think there was some reasoning behind that. You get to make the decision, if you will.
Sure. And not to interject, but basically by botching, as I understand it, they say they got to the sting location too late. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did they not take a phone and start ostensibly being the female to set up a meet?
Correct.
And in fact, I don't know whether they were doing this on purpose or to try to emulate a 16-year-old, but they said, do you want to meet at the Bridge or ARE, the store? Obviously that should have been OR. So again, I don't know whether that's lack of intellect on these deputies' parts or whether they were trying to emulate the 16-year-old, but I'm gonna let you take it back over from there. And we're gonna provide our audience with the link for these texts. That will be the first of 2 documents that we will be presenting. We will have a number of documents by the conclusion of this whole series, but we're gonna focus on these first 2 in today, and the first of which is these color text, which Mr. Matthews has been gracious enough to provide us. I didn't mean to interject too long, but you pick it right back up.
Mr. Robert, that's quite all right. And to preface what he's saying is, all this information that I got was legally obtained through a public records request through both the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office and the Attorney General's Office.
Yes.
So none of this is classified information by any means, and it's out there for the public. You just have to know where to look and who to ask for it. So back to the sting operation. Having been the veteran of countless sting operations, anybody who is involved in an operation like this knows that you have your people in place well before the meet time for several reasons. And I don't want to get into it too much, but
sure, you
want to be there in case the guy does some recon because he might smell a rat.
Okay.
Okay, now we're talking about a law enforcement officer. This is not John Q. Citizen.
Right.
You know, he's supposed to be smarter than your average bear.
Sure.
So, one, they don't have the people in place.
Mm-hmm.
And the text messages start out innocuously, hey, it's me, I lost my phone. And he's like, oh yeah, how you been doing? And it's back and forth. And then it progressively, and you can be the judge, it progressively gets more to where he's digging into like, hey, can I see you? Or do you live alone or with friends?
Right.
Or do they let you go anywhere you want to? Do you have to be back at a certain time?
Right.
So it culminates into the fact that she asked him, do you want oral or that other stuff?
Uh-huh.
And then she comes right back with another text behind that says, do you want to meet at the store or by the bridge?
With the word "or" spelled as A-R-E.
Right.
And we will just point out very briefly, he did not respond with, when she asked, do you want oral or that other stuff, he did not respond. However, they did agree upon I'll let you pick it back up at a
Well,
specific time and where they were going to meet.
when you say he didn't respond, that's not entirely accurate.
Okay, correct me then.
He did respond, "I'll meet you by the bridge." Now, and this was all under the guise, and it came out in a report by Lee Anderson, Major, at the time, that Fred was attempting to help her get into the National Guard, and that he was just going to meet her this day to take her to lunch.
Ah, okay.
So there were two things that were not discussed in this whole chain, text chain, and one was lunch and one was the National Guard. So if you're John Q. Citizen, once again, I beseech you, don't let any politician or career law enforcement or former sheriff or current sheriff tell you that there's no probable cause or there wasn't a crime committed, because that's ludicrous. He never said, "Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Oral sex? I don't know what you're talking about. You're putting the cart before the horse." I never. You see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying.
Normal
Yeah.
human beings that aren't going down that path would have said, "Oh, wait a minute. You got the wrong guy. You're going down the wrong way." He didn't say that. In fact, it gets worse, because he says, "Yes, I'll meet you at the bridge."
Right.
Then he goes on to explain that I'll be in a such and such vehicle. I'll be arriving at exactly this time.
11:50, right?
I'm not
Go
even
time.
going to pull into a parking spot. Just when I pull into the store parking lot, you step out of the store and get in.
Yes.
Well, obviously she wasn't there. And once he got there and she didn't
Yes.
show up, well, then he comes back with a text, "Hey, look, I'm going to the gym."
Right.
Now, he leaves the location. By this time, whoever's running this botched operation releases the hounds, if you will, to go to the location. They pass him on the way.
Okay.
Okay, they see him. Okay, that's him right there. So they get there and they scratch their head. They figure out, okay, what are we going to do? So they end up, long story short, they go pick him up.
All right.
They get him back to the office, and that's once again where Lee Anderson and the chief deputy then, Bobby Weber, now the sheriff, have a meeting with him. And here's the strange part about this. This is a criminal investigation, ladies and gentlemen. This is not an internal affairs investigation.
Right.
If it would have been an internal affairs investigation, they would have had to do what's called a Garrity form, which basically says anything you say can't be used against you in criminal court, but we can nail you with policy violations.
Right.
This is a criminal investigation. 1481, indecent behavior with a juvenile, malfeasance in office, and there's a litany of other charges that could be argued.
Okay.
So they bring him in and they question him. They do not advise him of his Miranda rights.
Okay.
Which is, you have to do that by law.
Sure.
Okay? Now, if they did and they just didn't provide it to me or the Attorney General's office and they didn't give it to me in my public records request, there's a problem there.
Sure.
I don't think it occurred. Okay? So then he tells them the story that, no, I didn't send her any pictures, and I was just trying to help her get in the National Guard and I was going to take her to lunch. Well, now, armed with this lie, they bring him into Jeff Wally's office, the sitting sheriff.
Correct.
Okay, and basically what transpires in there, apparently they break him down, and Corder has a come to Jesus moment, says, "Yeah, okay, I did send her some pictures, and yeah, we did kind of talk
Okay.
out of the ordinary on the text."
Yeah.
So at that point, here's one of the other things. The investigator who worked the case, Kelly Brown, he never interviewed Corder. Why did that not happen? Now, if he didn't want to make a statement, at least you bring him in, read him his rights, he signs his rights form, you go on tape and he says, "Hey, look, I'm not saying anything until I get my attorney."
Sure.
That never happened, ladies and gentlemen. Why did that not happen?
That's a good question.
Is it shoddy police work on the part of the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office? Or was it a cover-up?
Either scenario is not good.
Exactly. So now you've got the man at the top involved. You've got the sheriff. You've got the chief deputy. You've got a high-ranking lieutenant colonel in Lee Anderson, and they basically say, "Okay, well, you can resign," and then they change it the next day to he resigned in lieu of termination.
Okay. And we will provide a link, just briefly to interject. That's the second document we're providing you with is Fred's, I'll just use first name, being relieved of duty. So we're going to provide that document. We're going to create a table, and we're going to add documents as we go through features, because folks, this is going to be fascinating, but we're not going to overload you with everything at once. It would be a lot to absorb. It's been a lot for me to absorb. But in this first installment, you're going to get the link about him being relieved of his duties. Now you pick back up, because I think the next part, trying to anticipate what you're probably going to say, is going to be quite interesting. So you go ahead.
So that occurs there. Keep this in mind throughout this whole thing, ladies and gentlemen. Just throw it in the back of your head. A 48-year-old man, besides the fact that he's a law enforcement officer, and that as law enforcement officers, we have to be held to a higher standard.
Absolutely supposed to be.
He has nude photos of a 16-year-old on his cell phone.
Okay.
And you don't arrest him. She gives a statement stating that he was wanting sex, oral and everything else, and he solicited the photos from her. Yes, that is in her statement.
Mm-hmm.
They don't charge him. Why? Is there some prosecutorial hurdles that they may have had to cross via some timestamp things on the photographs? That is immaterial. When you get his phone and she picks out the photos of her on his phone, all of the other of how he got them, because she's saying, I sent them to him.
Mm-hmm. Now, by the way, if anybody's wondering, her phone apparently got dropped in the river.
Correct. She had lost her phone at some point between their first exchange and the sting operation. So, back to where we were.
Yeah.
After the sting, he was, if you want to call that, being questioned by the sheriff and the now current sheriff, Bobby Weber and Lee Anderson. Then they take his phone, they write a search warrant for it, they do it legally,
mm-hmm.
and they dump his phone for the data in his phone.
Mm-hmm.
They discover that in, and I'm going by memory, in less than a 20-day span in the early part of January, February of 2018, there was 68 voice calls between the juvenile female and Corder, and about 743 SMS messages, which is either text or photos, between the two. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize something's going on.
Sure.
So armed with all that information, and her statement, the photographs, which the sheriff's office tries to claim at that point that it was just one photograph of the 16-year-old female's nude breast.
Yes, I saw that. Which even one, but go ahead.
Absolutely. Minus the photos, just the
nature of the dialogue.
Her statement saying that he wanted sex,
mm-hmm.
and the text messages on the phone calls, and the sting operation in and of itself would be more than enough. Ladies and gentlemen, they put people in jail every day for talking to law enforcement officers
mm-hmm.
who they think are juveniles via the internet, and they go to jail for that.
Certainly.
Now you've got a whole host of over and above that, and they did nothing. Why did they not do anything? Your guess is as good as mine. I've got some thoughts on that, and maybe Mr. Robert will lead me to that later on in the series. But
absolutely,
that is what happened at that point.
That sounds great. So it's up to you if you'd like this to be a concluding point. I think you've probably whetted everyone's appetite for the second installment. I think everyone would have to admit this is going to be an intriguing installment. You have the two documents that are going to be in the table that we've told you we're presenting to you. Trust me, you're going to see plenty more documents before we're done with this series, because as he indicated, he made public records requests, got every bit of this above board. I got the distinct impression that a few people may not be so happy that you made the request or that they had to turn them over, but that's beside the point. In fact, I know that to be the case, judging by some of the wording in some of it. I'll just cut it off at that, because having been the recipient of that kind of terse exchange when I've made public records requests myself, I can certainly relate. So go ahead, if you have something else.
I'm going to leave you with this. There are those that are out there that'll say, well, why didn't you say something? Why did you do that? Why are you coming out with this now? Let me explain something to you right now, ladies and gentlemen.
I think this is important.
That is a lie.
Right.
When I found out this information, I went out with neck surgery and I was out for 12 weeks. While I was out for 12 weeks, it was probably the beginning of June. So this happened at the end of May.
We're talking 2018.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So we're going to fast forward to probably June 7th or 8th. I have to look at my notes. I contacted the Attorney General's office and filed a complaint.
Correct. And just to let everybody know, if you click on that second document, remember I said we'd be providing 2 documents as part of this series. If you go to the very last page of that second document, which is only 4 pages long, you will see their response to the sheriff's office with regard to your complaint. Now, they don't mention you by name to my recollection, but you can read the document for yourself, and we'll highlight some of the wording from that document that I believe was dated October the 31st of 2018.
Correct.
If I remember correctly. You pick it back up.
And through this series, the Attorney General's office was contacted, the Louisiana State Police was contacted, the FBI was contacted. Now, some of you may think, well, gosh, if you contacted all 3 of those agencies, well, certainly they would have found something. You got to use your common sense in this, okay? It was all a cover-up. Why did the Attorney General's office cover it up? Your guess is as good as mine. Like I said, I've got some conjectures onto why that happened. State Police as well, okay? I brought them the whole case file just last fall,
right,
in 2022.
Right.
And we had a very terse exchange with the state police.
I saw that.
About, how did you get this, and all this and that, because it was like pulling teeth to try to get them to even have a meeting.
Right, I understand.
About it.
I understand.
And then the FBI is kind of like, well, that's not really our gig, and But anyway, somebody should have done something. There's plenty of probable cause there to make it. And here's the thing: you can't say, "Oh, well, that's over and done with." No. The statute of limitations on a crime like this is 18 years. Excuse me. Let me correct myself. Is 30 years beyond the 18th birthday of the victim. She's 21 right now.
All right.
So we've got some time to go.
27 years by my math.
Yes, sir.
All righty. Well, I think you have done an outstanding job of just getting us. He has told me the entire episode. That's why I'm telling you we have to break it down into installments. I think that we have adequately laid the foundation for installment 1. I know you're going to want to tune in for installment 2 of this fascinating feature on the part of Sheriff candidate C.J. Matthews, candidate for sheriff in Ascension Parish. I want to thank everyone for your loyal viewership, for those of you who just happen to drop by the site every now and then, because we know a lot of you don't subscribe, but you nevertheless see fit to drop by and visit the site, and that's perfectly fine. We know that by the sheer number of hits that we get. So thank everyone for your dedication, and we look forward to bringing you installment 2 of this fascinating series real soon. Thank you once again, Mr. Matthews.